Okay. So like I said, we're going to be discussing what somatic coaching is from both the clinical understanding of it and also potentially if you're a client, you're like, hey, I'm really interested in this, been hearing a lot about it. We'll be going over all of those things. So a little bit about me. My name is Dr. Kelsey Evans-Amalu. Many of my clients and students call me Dr. K. I'm a professor at the University of Central Florida. And a lot of my research has been since 2015 has been on mindfulness-based interventions, which has led me into the work of somatic experiencing. My business is called the Mindful Prof, where we offer both one-on-one coaching, workshops, trainings. We work in corporate and also in K through 12 schools. So a lot of the work here is going to be from the point of view of one-on-one work. But this really can be applied from a setting of both working with groups and also if you're wanting to work with corporate clients or students. So it can be applied in many different ways. I wanted to start off tonight, though, with a meditation practice that is commonly used with my clients, especially in a grounding setting. So grounding meaning well, I'll mention this later, but when we talk about grounding, what we mean is a calming practice or a centering practice, more moving into the parasympathetic state of the central nervous system, where we can find a sense of safety. So if you feel so inclined to join me, I'm going to get a quick sip of water before I start talking even more. But while I do so, if you do want to join, you always have the option to keep your eyes open. You can keep your eyes closed if it feels more embodying for you. Maybe you want to lay down for this. You can sit in your chair. You can even stand. So find something that feels safe and honoring for your body in this moment. And we'll get started in about 30 seconds with this practice. Hmm. So once you've found your way to how you would like to practice, know that you can always change up how your eyes are, how your body is from moment to moment as somatic experiencing, since it is body based. You always have agency in what feels most honoring for your body. And sometimes we might not know. So taking it moment to moment, if it ever feels like it is overwhelming or overstimulating to the body, you can always exit out of the practice. But maybe you get curious with some of the sensations that are coming up if it feels okay to explore. So we'll begin this process with a centering mudra practice. And mudra is Sanskrit for a hand position. And you can, and let me know if you can't see me, um, but I'll demo the hand position first, where we'll be taking what is known as the Lotus flower mudra, where we take our pinkies together and our thumbs together, and then we allow our fingers to separate, where it is supposed to look like the blossoming of the lotus mudra, a flower that we often see um, in a lake or in water. So if you choose to take this mudra, you're more than welcome to do so. Or maybe you want to visualize yourself taking this mudra, but then come back to your chosen gaze, your chosen eyesight, and you can take the mudra that I just showed a minute ago, or feel free not to take it. That's always your option. So then whatever you're taking, allow yourself to find awareness of your body first. So notice your body, notice your legs, the sits bones may be connected to the chair below or to the ground below, whatever position that you're in. Maybe you notice your feet touching the ground if you're standing or seated. What's connected to the earth? You can engage your belly a little bit, maybe elongate your spine some more. Just allow yourself to simultaneously soften through your shoulders, your jaw, and your eyes. We'll be here for just a moment or two, noticing our breath, Gently breathe in and out. And maybe it feels okay to sigh out through your mouth both times. And this might be the first time that you've noticed your breath all day. It's very normal, especially when we're trying to come back in post-holiday season and go right into the busy season again. Then once you've noticed your breath a couple times, begin to notice your hand position again of this lotus flower mudra. Notice your pinkies touching together, the sensation of that connection, of even the thumbs now touching together, and even the space between each hand. And it might be challenging to notice all of these sensations at once, but just bringing curiosity and inquiry to your experience. There's no right or wrong here. If the mind wants to float to a different thing, which most certainly probably will, because we are human in that place, you always have the choice to bring it back to noticing your hands. And as you breathe, consider that in this space, in this lotus flower mudra, there exists a seed of possibility here at the very base of where the wrists are meeting together. And lotus flowers tend to grow from the murky bottoms of ponds. And once they blossom, they break through the water and open up towards the sun. And for this reason, there's a saying that goes, no mud, no lotus. And imagine that there is this seed of possibility within the mudra that you're holding. Continuing with your hands in this position, maybe repeat this phrase to yourself a couple times, either silently or out loud. As the lotus flower knows its way to the sun, my body knows how to heal. And that phrase might have offered maybe a tinge of challenge in noticing that. Maybe it doesn't feel believable. So just notice what sensations arise. All of it is information. We'll repeat this with our breath a couple times, and you can repeat it out loud or silently to yourself. As the lotus flower knows its way to the sun, my body knows how to heal. As the lotus flower knows its way to the sun, my body knows how to heal. And one final time. As the lotus flower knows its way to the sun, my body knows how to heal. And feel free to take a big breath in here through your nose. And exhale, sigh out through your mouth. Mm. If you chose to take the lotus flower mudra, feel free to drop your hands down into your lap. And if your eyes were closed, you can open them back up. And if you feel like sharing in the chat what that experience was like for you, maybe it felt like something that felt centering, maybe it felt jarring. I'm just curious about what your experience is with that, as I welcome all experiences. And sometimes that meditation for me can be personally challenging, as sometimes I feel like my body doesn't know how to heal, especially when I'm stuck in fight or flight or feel very anxious. And it might feel even like a lie. Some days it feels like it's really aligned. Yep, and it's okay to feel like your mind is floaty and mind is drifting. So know that you're human and that um, there's a fallacy within meditation practices that our mind needs to be quiet. In fact, your mind will be busy, and it's what we do with those thoughts and how we come back to noticing maybe the mudra or the breath and what we do with the thoughts that is really part of the practice. So I really do appreciate again the honesty and sharing that maybe your mind did feel like it was bouncing from one thing to the other. And sometimes, yep, it felt challenging in moments and calming in others. So noticing even those experiences of maybe one moment it felt calming, one moment it felt challenging, and very similar to the experiences and emotions that we feel in our body on a daily basis, that there's so many experiences to be felt. And maybe that is very challenging for you, oscillate between one emotion to the other, or even hold multiple experiences at once. So again, we're human in what we experience. So we'll go from there into more about how to define somatic coaching. So thank you for those that did share. And again, continue to place in the chat what your experiences are. Again, I want to make sure that you are seen in this place. So some of y'all have already stated that somatic is the body, and you are correct in that. Soma is a Greek word for quote unquote the body. Um, so when we think about somatic coaching, we are referencing the body in this type of coaching quite frequently. Essentially, it's the practice of being mindfully aware of sensations in the body and then learning how to tap in deeper, understanding your central nervous system and how to gain greater capacity to widen our quote unquote window of tolerance and what we're experiencing, whether we experiencing a challenging scenario of like anxiousness or that leads us to anxiety, or maybe we're experiencing depression. Allowing ourselves to notice what sensations are tied to those experiences, and then giving yourself tools to help sustain you into what you're experiencing, and then being able to also give language to transmute that experience or transcend that experience to make meaning of what you're experiencing and how to pinpoint again, even different experiences that you might have down the road, because many things can come up even on a daily basis or what you're experiencing in a week. So essentially, somatic coaching is going to be based off of a guy named Peter Levine. He wrote a book called Waking the Tiger. It's an excellent book where he talks about somatic experiencing from understanding the felt sensations of the body, not just when we're experiencing trauma, but also when we're experiencing calm. So there's many different feelings that we can have on a daily basis. And the more that we can understand our body, the more that we can understand about what to do about it in situations that might feel more challenging and how to come back into a sense of safety. So again, Peter Levine is the main dude that has really stimulated this work and popularized it. And there's many more other somatic experiencing therapists and coaches now that do reference his work. We'll also be talking about polyvagal theory and what that is and how that comes into play in understanding our central nervous system from a more therapeutic idea. But that's the basis of it. If we were to define it more as a mindfulness understanding of the body. Why I wanted to define it right off the bat is a lot of things are happening right now where kind of like what mindfulness did about 10 years ago, where mindfulness was the buzzword. Now somatic seems to be the buzzword. Or it can often get misconstrued. So the best example that I can give is within Indian culture, within India, uh, tea is also called chai. So that's the direct translation of tea is chai. In the United States, when I want to order a chai tea, when I'm wanting to order like the traditional spices that are made from that within Indian culture, um, it's like I'm double ordering a tea. So I have a brother-in-law that is Indian, and he always laughs when he goes into Trader Joe's and he sees the box of tea that is labeled chai tea, because literally it says tea in his culture. So the same is said for some of these things that are happening within um, somatic experiencing, where I see workshops right now that are advertising somatic breath work, which essentially you're just saying that you're using the body to breathe. Or even if it's just somatic processing, it would be if I say I'm doing somatic movement, that's literally like the chai tea scenario where you're saying body movement. like it's very repetitive per se. So somatic coaching is going to be otherwise known as somatic experiencing, where we use that specific therapeutic modality to help coach the body and understanding some of the sensations that are being brought up. It gets a little confusing, I know, because again, people are just tagging on somatic into everything these days. But as far as if you're looking at going into somatic coaching or somatic-based therapy, it's going to be based on Peter Levine's work of somatic experiencing. If again, they're doing it in the tradition of how it's meant to be done from a therapeutic scenario. So questions on that, because I know that that does get very confusing. And I wanted to offer some space for any of just the definition piece. So I'll give about a couple seconds to see if anyone wants to pop in a question on the specific piece as I get a sip of water. Hmm. Okay. So to go in more detail, I pull a lot from but Cotton's work. So there are other schools of somatic-based therapies and coaching besides Levine and SE work, though. Yes, yep. So thank you for that question. Um, so dependent upon the tradition, so Cook Cotton, who I have on this slide, she calls her work embodiment healing. Um, there are also Pat Ogden is an example from sensory motor work. So, which is very similar to somatic experiencing. So it's if I take the umbrella of somatic traditions within therapy, there are like just like mindfulness-based practices, there are going to be different interventions that are offered. So I tend to go with somatic experiencing, but then I do pull in other somatic traditions like yoga. I do Reiki. I do some hypnosis, yoga nidra. And there are other bottom up practices that are can be used in this work, but it wouldn't be under Peter Levine's work of somatic experiencing. So it does get a little confusing. Yep, for Komi. So Komi would be another somatic tradition. But when we just be wary of what is being offered, like if they are offering Hakomi or somatic experiencing or sensory motor exercises. Um, I like to, again, use Peter Levine, but for other folks, they might want to use the Hakomi tradition. I do really like Hakomi, but I'm not trained in it. So for me, I go with somatic experiencing because I am trained in that tradition. So great question. I really do appreciate that. And let me know if that cleared it up with a thumbs up on the chat or an okay, because I can go into more depth if you need. And I'm also happy to offer other resources. Cool. Thank you. Um, so as far as the work that I do for an embodiment process, and other folks might have a way in how they work into this. But again, I don't want to speak for them because there are like the question that was asked, there are other traditions. Um, but the embodied healing process is going to be something that it requires multiple steps, is nonlinear, is nuanced, and does require pendulation and titration. And I'll explain a little bit about what that means in a minute. But I do like this diagram that is offered by Cook Cotton in her most recent book, where she talks about how embodiment practices, um, it's it can enter into it in many different ways, but most of the time it does look like entering in first by befriending your body and looking at how to resource ourselves if our body has never been befriended before, or if we've detached from wanting to feel our body, which often shows up in trauma work. So it looks like befriending the body, providing safety and care for that experience, developing your inner resources, knowing your why. So there is a lot of meaning making in this, and then processing the trauma. So it takes a little bit to work up towards the processing of the trauma. Because from a trauma-informed perspective and trauma-sensitive care, um, if there weren't resources provided first, going right into processing the trauma from an embodied perspective would lead to disembodiment. So disembodiment of the tendencies, reactions, and behaviors that have the propensity to pull you out of your own feeling and sensations that you're experiencing in your body. So it's where this idea of pendulating and titration does come in, um, where pendulating looks like going back and forth like a pendulum of noticing something and then coming back into safety. So same with titration. We go for something that feels really challenging, and then we start to pull back and resource yourself, and pulling back into safety. So we don't go for the hardest thing first. Kind of like riding a bike. We don't ride a bike without training wheels first. I mean, I guess you can, but it's not suggested. Uh, but we do it in stages. So we go for like the low hanging fruit first of going for something that feels like what does stress feel like in the body rather than bringing up your most traumatic memory right off the bat and going into that. So in general, I do like to offer some different principles, some guidelines into what somatic coaching looks like. Then other somatic experiencing folks or different traditions might suggest other things, but in general, these are ideas that can be offered across the board when you are working with somatic experiencing or different somatic traditions from a more therapeutic understanding. So for principle one, this idea of embodied awareness that was mentioned on the graph, somatic coaching tends to emphasize connecting with the body and cultivating awareness of bodily sensations, emotions, and patterns. Because many of us, inclusive of myself, and why I first got involved in this work from a client perspective, um, I got introduced to this work in my rehab facility when I was in my eating disorder treatment facility 15 years ago. So for these were the things personally for me that were quite impactful in my own recovery journey. As from a eating disordered perspective, um, I disembodied continually because I did not want to be in my body at all. Um, so for me, working with some of the felt sensations, emotion, my own body took a bit of time to do because I had disembodied for so long that I did not even have any sensation or couldn't even define what anger felt like in my body or what sadness felt like in body because I was completely numb. So that it was a very challenging personal experience. Um, but as far as working with folks with coaching, and also what the research says, many people are walking around disembodied. And let me just check the chat. Is disembodying like dissociating? Yes. Yep. So from the somatic perspective, um, disembodying would be kind of the equivalent of dissociating. Yep. And that word is, yeah, I do appreciate you bringing that up because it's, yep, and detachment as well. So actually, um, great point. I do appreciate you mentioning detachment, the word detachment, because this can get kind of confusing depending upon what tradition you're looking at. As if I were to mindfully detach from something, that could actually be a something that would be a trauma-informed response that maybe I do need to compartmentalize and mindfully detach from that experience for the moment. But if I am doing that continually, like when I was in my actively involved in my eating disorder, I was completely detached 24/7, or I was completely disembodied 24/7. So I don't want to I'd say that dissociating is like this negative thing. I think that it can have a purpose, especially if it is done with some support. But if I am disembodying all the time, then I like that is it's then I can see why it happens, but it might not be the most ideal scenario to live your life. So, yes, thank you for that question. So, by tuning into the wisdom of our body, we can gain valuable insights and accessing new possibilities for growth. So, this idea of connecting to and befriending your embodied self um, again, does take some time, but as far as the work that I do with clients, it tends to be the way we enter into first is offering some um, awareness of the body again and doing that through a felt sensation practice, which we will do in a moment, just to kind of give you an idea of what that feels like. Um, so essentially, a lot of this is definitely the intersection of I like to say where research meets woo-woo or science meets spirituality. Is it's the idea of taking all of these different cultural tradition practices. And I pull a lot from the Buddhist and Hindu understanding. Hakomi is more of an indigenous perspective, where Western science has long claimed to be able to study the body and the soul separately. A lot more research is suggesting that this mind body dualism has always been challenged by Eastern indigenous understandings of the interconnected nature of the body, mind, emotions, and spirit. So, a lot more research is now suggesting that we do need to operate in a more holistic realm as the body and mind are not separate, but Western traditions tend to separate out. So, more recent scholars have taken to use the term body mind to describe the interdependence of mental and physical processes, which I'm very encouraged by that. One second. Recent advice I've received through DBT is mentioned sitting with your feelings, particularly related to trauma. What's a more mindful and a somatic approach to dealing with trauma? Yep, and we're gonna get there. So I'm gonna end that question. Um, but we'll do a felt sense practice first. So I like to do this practice, especially if you are someone, which I mean, I think the most recent statistic is that 70% of folks have experienced something traumatic. Um, so most likely you have experienced some trauma in your life, whether that's capital T or lowercase t trauma. Um, but it does tend to have a physical response in the body. So body scan practices can sometimes be triggering for folks that have different points in the body where it might feel unsafe to examine and have inquiry of. So this body scan practice that we're about to do, again, you can practice with me if you'd like, um, offers a more positive embodiment rather than some of the things that might come up when you do a traditional body scan practice of just noticing the body without resourcing yourself. So if you'd like to join me for this brief body scan practice before we move on, and just to help resource and get some uh, just to help lay kind of the groundwork again without just speaking at you, that you can also experience some of the things that we do. You can lay down, you can sit, you can stand, very similar to what was offered in the very beginning meditative practice. Same thing can be offered for this. Mhm. So just allow yourself some time to set up. So I get another sip of my beverage. Mm. And then if you're joining me, or if you'd like to do this practice later when you listen to the recording, you can do that too. So allow yourself to feel well supported in whatever you're in, whether that is seated or lying down. And eyes can be closed or open, your choice. And gently breathe in and out and consider these two embodied self statements. I will consider that my body is my source of experience in this world. Maybe repeat that out loud to yourself or silently. I will consider that my body is a source of grounding, connection, and support. I'll repeat these phrases a couple more times and feel free to repeat it after me or again in your own time. I will consider that my body is my source of experience in this world. I will consider that my body is a source of grounding, connection, and support. And one more time. I will consider that my body is my source of experience in this. I will consider that my body is a source of grounding, connection, and support. Now you can hold on to those statements as we offer some inquiry of the body. We'll first just bring awareness to our breath again. Beginning with your lungs, just notice the breath at the rise and fall. Breathe here, breathing into your lungs. With each in-breath offering nourishment and each out-breath offering release, whatever that looks like for you. And maybe notice any tension or holding of the body. Maybe you notice some tightness into the upper chest, which is where generally anxiety likes to show up. And maybe give permission for release and relaxation. And consider saying to your lungs, I am taking the time to thank you and know you and offer curiosity to you. I am taking the time to thank you and know you and offering curiosity to you. We'll explore other areas of the body now. It'll be a very brief body scan. I'm just doing the same thing that we offered with our lungs, and maybe you stay with the lungs. That is always possible to stay with the lungs. But notice now your right leg and left leg. Notice the lower half of the body. And offering the same curiosity, notice any tension or holding that may exist there, and permission for release and relaxation. And consider maybe stating, I am taking the time to thank you and know you. We'll continue to move up the body. Notice the torso, the front and the back. And same idea, taking time to notice sensations there. There might be many sensations that exist in different parts of the body. Usually we tune into the loudest or most challenging. And maybe give yourself again permission for release and relaxation. And consider stating, I am taking the time to thank you and know you. Doing the same thing with the arms, the left and the right arm. Noticing areas of tension. And consider stating, I'm taking the time to thank you and know you. And notice the entire body. Notice any tension or holding. Give permission for release and relaxation. I'm taking the time to thank you and know you. And in closing, consider the statements again. I will consider that my body is my source of experience in this world. I will consider that my body is a source of grounding, connection, and support. And if you'd like, maybe you jot down again some of your experiences as you exit out, because that is part of this work, is to notice the experiences that showed up in the body. We begin to notice trends that show up in the body, whether something feels tense, whether something feels hot, cold, challenged, open. There's many different vocabulary words that are offered because a lot of the times we may not even be able to define what those experiences are. But again, Peter Levine has a wonderful list where he has a lot of vocabulary that can be used in felt sense processing of the body. Again, if you wanted to offer that in the chat, I'm welcome to hear that. And then we'll continue to move on. Okay. So principle two of what I like to work with is the regulation and resilience. As we start to befriend the body, things are going to show up just probably like what happened in both of those meditations, where we experienced some challenge and maybe some ease. Um, and when the challenges arise in noticing the body, somatic coaching focuses on helping to regulate the nervous system and build resilience with it. So we develop skill sets to help self-regulate, which then whenever I work with clients, I always tell them I have a really bad business model where my desire is to give you the tools that you need so that you don't personally need me anymore. Um, where we work on different skill sets and tools that you can do it with yourself in real time. So I'll give you an example of something that I did on Christmas Day. I had 10 people staying with me in my house. I also have an 8-month-old. So it was my baby's first Christmas. We had my in-laws staying with me. And I was also cooking everything. So it's kind of a recipe for not disaster, but a recipe for my own stress. Because my thing that I consistently work on is um, letting go of the need to be perfect or my desire to be perfect. Um, so when I was noticing stress show up in my body, um, I like to regulate a lot with one of the instantaneous release practices is going to be breath work. If you're a nerd like me, where you maybe watch Dr. Andrew Huberman, I love that guy. He does a lot of the groundwork for me on proving a lot of this stuff. Um, I do a lot of what's known as cyclical sighing, or 4-6 count of the breath, to help manage my stress in real time. So it looked for me on Christmas Day, it looked like exiting out, going outside for just a moment, doing some breaths for me to actually come back in my body to be able to um, handle what was happening in real time. And of course, like that's working with my own window of tolerance, where I have widened it a lot in the past, where previously I had a very narrow window where everything would set me off. Um, so again, I say that with the caveat of maybe it might look a little bit longer to do different skill sets to come back into feeling embodied. But for me, that's going to be an example that I like to use to come back in, especially if it's like something that's not traumatic, but still feels stressful. So essentially, we're developing your resources and then giving you more the psychoeducation of understanding what the central nervous system is and things that happen when we are in fight or flight, fawn or freeze. So again, we do work with the nervous system, as I stated at the beginning. I'm not going to go through all of this, um, but the autonomic nervous system is going to be this peripheral nervous system that regulates really everything of our involuntary physiological processes, inclusive of our heart rate, blood pressure, respiration, digestion, and sexual arousal. So when it comes to noticing things like the felt sense or interoceptive exercises, we're really noticing what's going on internally with the body. And we do learn this at a really early age when we're developing like our understanding of the body. So I look at my baby, for instance, and she's learning right now the different processes of her body. But when stress starts to happen and we grow up and we have traumatic experiences, it's really easy to disembody from that, where interoception or the awareness of what's going on in our body becomes really hard to do. So it is a skill set that does have to be practiced. And I encourage folks, if you have experienced something traumatic, to do so with a trauma informed or trauma sensitive practitioner that knows about how the body works. Because again, trying to do this on our own can be really challenging, especially when we might notice our heartbeat and our heartbeat's going really, really fast because we're having potentially maybe we have panic attacks or we might notice anxiety start to rise. So noticing heartbeat going really, really fast might feel really triggering for us if we don't know why that is happening. So it's kind of can be a double-edged sword. So it's why we take it really slow and give more psychoeducational tools rather than just giving straight tools without the psychoeducational piece. So it's understanding the central nervous system and then giving the reason why and then giving tools along with it. I'm just going to skip over this part. So principle 3 is inclusive of mind-body integration, where we go over the psychoeducational piece. And it recognizes the inseparable connection between the mind and the body. So it's not just addressing the body. We do have to, of course, address the top down, meaning the cognitive side of things. A lot of the work I do with folks, I'm located in 2 different therapy groups. So I'm located in both Tampa and in Orlando. I'm in therapy offices for that reason, as I am not a therapist, but I do work side by side with therapists. So if somebody is seeing a therapist that is trained predominantly in CBT or maybe another model, they might not be able to always work with the body. So I tag team a lot with therapists, but I also am trained as a coach to work with the mind. But I tend to not go into the deep work that therapists do. So just a heads up on that. Um, but the mind body piece is it is part of this work. So somatic coaching techniques do integrate, yes, we do integrate movement, breath work, mindfulness practices, but we also work into some of the subconscious stuff that's happening, some of these stories that are showing up when we are going into these meditative practices, or you notice some of the stories that are arising from something that happened in the past when we are doing some movement practices. We have to talk about it. So it's not just doing a body practice and then calling it a day. Um, we go into the meaning making behind it, which does include talking about it. This work does also come as a basis of polyvagal theory developed by Stephen Porges, where he talks about it as a framework of understanding our central nervous system and looking at our physiological responses and our social engagement system. So essentially, this entire framework is goes back to the question that was asked earlier, and how do we do the body, or how does the body and trauma show up, or how do we use a somatic approach to dealing with trauma? So this is the framework for it. Um, it essentially provides insights into how our nervous system is going to regulate our bodily responses, emotions, and behavior, and our neuroceptive cues, or rather the relation to safety and threat. So when we're doing this work, according to polyvagal theory, our nervous system actually includes 3 different components. In science, in science class in biology, we might have just learned about the parasympathetic and the sympathetic state. Polyvagal talks about three different ones where we have the parasympathetic actually divided into two, which is going to be the ventral vagal and then the dorsal vagal, and then we have the sympathetic response. So we get more into that, into what each one looks like and how your body is showing up in real time when we're processing some of the traumatic experiences or memories that you have are that you're wanting to move through. So, case in point today, one of the experiences that I had with clients is we've developed their resources. They've continually worked on their inner resourcing when they are feeling challenged or stressed out. So they've already done the groundwork, and now we're in the traumatic reprocessing portion of talking about a memory first. Um, and then we'll go into what does that feel like in the body. So if you've ever done ART, it's kind of similar, but we don't use eye movement or it's not anything similar to EMDR, but we do talk about the memory, but we experience it in the body. So we go for low stakes first. We're not going for that high stakes trauma first, but we want to essentially develop a muscle memory type of thing where we're noticing how the body's responding, and especially when you've been through something super challenging, like what's showing up. And then every time that we reprocess through it, we'll start to give some meaning behind it um, and trying to, instead of it being like a 9 out of 10 on your stress level, we'll start to move and process through some body-based stuff of bringing it down to like a level 6, and then we'll reprocess it again and bring it down to a level 3 until it feels like it's more manageable to be held in the body and in the mind. So as far as that question that was offered earlier, that's what it looks like in real time. I'm not going to show it today because, again, I don't want to bring in somebody's trauma from who's on here tonight because we haven't laid the groundwork. I don't know who you are, and that would not be trauma informed. But I can give that example of how it looks like in practice. So we learned about more about what polyvagal theory is, how the body responds in each scenario, because each person's body responds differently. So we do map out each client and how it shows up in dorsal vagal, how it shows up in the ventral vagal, so on and so forth. And I'm not going to go over this because we're almost close to time. But then we show up into how does this look into embodying your life? What does embodied presence feel like? Because sometimes embodied present might not feel safe. So we are able to process some of that, but sometimes embodied presence might feel safe. So being fully present in the here and now is a fundamental aspect of somatic coaching. By cultivating embodied presence, you can deepen your connection with yourself and others, fostering authentic relationships and effective communication. So embodying your life does look very different, where I can offer you some questions, and feel free to think about this right now. And if you do want to put this in the chat, you're more than welcome to do so. And it goes back even to the question that was offered earlier. How do I know when I am in a trauma response or if I am having an appropriate reaction to an unsafe situation in the present moment? So this is something that I directly ask my clients, and we work through this. The reflection can be, are safety and comfort the same thing? Can you recall a situation where you were safe or free from harm but felt uncomfortable? Have you ever felt comfortable in an unsafe situation? And these are things that I work on in real time with the clients when asking these questions. Again, so maybe some questions that you can ask yourself right here and now to evaluate the safety of any given situation. So it's a neuroceptive cue. How do I feel in my body? Do I feel safe, scared, or unsettled? Is my physical environment safe and free of violence and abuse? So thinking about that caveat where no one is hitting, kicking, punching, or pushing me, no one is calling me names or threatening me or anyone I care about. Do I have the power in this situation to act upon my own behalf? Do I take care of myself fully? Am I making my own choices? Am I not being pressured, pushed, or manipulated? So in embodied presence, these are things that I like to have my clients ask. And then we work through some of those things and what is showing up in the moment. Um, Again, that looks like a very generic example. But it's a, a quite common thing that does show up in somatic coaching. Um, and we don't have time to talk about the window of tolerance, but the window of tolerance is kind of what I've been continually referencing as to why the inner resources are very helpful in the body. These tools are helpful at the very beginning of this work because oftentimes when we show up and we've been disembodied for a while and then we're asking ourselves to notice the body again, um, something that might show up and noticing a sensation of the body, like noticing the fast heart rate or tension in the chest, might pull us into hyperarousal or hypoarousal. So we want to be able to widen the window of tolerance and giving you different tools that can help regulate you in real time to feel more grounded, present, flexible, and can help access reason. Um, and thank you. I know that some folks have to go since we are getting to the end of time, so I do really appreciate that. And you will get the recording for the rest of the video. Um, so I just want to end with principle 5. Principle 5 is really the culminating piece of this work, the release and integration portion of somatic coaching supports the release of stored tension, trauma, and limiting beliefs that are held within the body. This process allows for integration, the creation of new empowering experiences, enabling personal growth and transformation. So we process trauma with and through the body. Um, and again, this looks different for everybody. And generally happens once the person feels like they have the necessary tools to enter in with and reprocessing some of a particular traumatic experience that they want to move through. Um, and some folks that I see are simply here to learn the tools, and maybe they don't want to go immediately into, or excuse me, they don't want to do the reprocessing of the trauma, and they prefer to do that with a different therapist. So this can look very different depending upon the client, but most of the time is going into the working with regulation first, and then giving the tools to help process the release and integration back into your embodied presence. So we'll end with the same closing meditation that we did at the very beginning of this practice or of this presentation, and then I'll open it up for questions. I know that we are over time, and I'm happy to stay on a little bit longer since I did have to kind of rush through some of the important um, frameworks of these things. But I did want to end with a closing practice, especially if you do have to go. So similar to how we entered in with, we'll go back to the lotus flower mudra practice. So you can keep your eyes open or keep your eyes closed, whatever feels most empowering and safe for you. Noticing the breath in the body again. Maybe take some bigger exhales out. And then noticing what it feels like to offer yourself the same praise as you did before. As the lotus flower knows its way to the sun, my body knows how to heal. Noticing any sensations that might arise within your body when you state that to yourself. And repeating it a couple more times. As the lotus flower knows its way to the sun, my body knows how to heal. And even if you need to offer that up like a prayer or something to manifest, take one final breath here and then exhale out. Just allow yourself to come back into the room and stop the recording.